the earlier stages of the Challenger bracket. Of course, this week, WCS America Challenger bracket is doing the second and third rounds. We're going to take a look at some of the games that were played out in the first round of the Challenger bracket. First, we're going to take a look at Heart vs. Taeja and talk about how map control can be very important in TvT. We're going to talk about low econ at TVP and Jungle Boy vs. State, and then also Mass Roach build the Ghost User uses against Hwansing. In that match, of course, at the end of these three segments is going to be the viewer Q&A. So submit any questions you have to me on Twitter at axslav. Also, leave questions on YouTube comments. Go to youtube.com/official MLGSC2. Find any of the recent rule of engagement videos. Just leave a comment there as a question, and I'll find it answered on the next show. So, the first segment is going to be about TvT map control and Heart vs. Taeja. We're going to talk about a proxy marauder opening TvT, an important thing to consider when you're using that build. Then we're going to talk about delayed cloak banshees and, of course, doom drops, something you've seen a lot of in TvT lately, just picking up the whole army and sending in a massive doom drop to camp your opponent's production. So, we're going to start the stream play off at the 3-minute mark. And here we can see that Taeja is doing a proxy marauder build. So, he's proxying the barracks, and he's going ahead and attack them onto it. An important thing to note is he's only behind by one worker. So this isn't like he didn't like cut massive workers to make this build happen. It's a small economic hit, but it's not that huge. He's not hopelessly behind in economy. This doesn't have to be an all-in build by any means. Of course, what happened is his opponent, Heart, as soon as he got into the main, he saw the gas time and he saw no barracks. He knows it had to be proxy marauder rush, and so he wants to get this bunker out in the front as soon as possible. And getting this bunker out in front is a huge thing because what happens is the golden marauder build isn't to end the game. It's not like some crazy all-in build, right? It's just to put on some pressure. And the important thing what he's trying to do is get some cost-efficient trades. Like any SCV and Marine he can kill is happy. And also delay the opponent's expansion. So if you can force a Terran to stay in their main, you can even build your own bunker on their low ground, put a marauder in it, make it very annoying for Heart to go down and take his natural. So that's why Heart wants to put the bunker out here. Now, if you can't delay the natural, just try to do what damage you can. So, don't make too many marauders unless you're consistently doing damage. You have no bunker and you keep chipping away at things. If you can't get a lot of damage, then do exactly what we see Taeja doing here. Use the barracks to get high ground vision, pick away at a depot here. You can even pick away at this reactor. And this bunker will actually give him the range to start shooting Heart's bunker as well. So if Heart lets this bunker get up, he's going to be in trouble. Hopefully what he should do to defend against this is just pull the Marines out, pick off that SCV. Let's see if he actually does that. Yes, he does right before it dies. So don't want to let that bunker get up. But you can see here, what Taeja's doing is just trying to be annoying and cost efficient. Pick off an SCV here, pick off a Marine there, and it all adds up. Meanwhile, of course, behind it, he's tacking, right? So he's got a follow-up plan. His Widow Mine drop. You can go for Command Center right after this build, but it's a little bit risky because you don't have any Marines back at home. So if your opponent does a Hellion drop, or if they do like send a Banshee to your base and you went Command Center instead of Factory Starport, you're going to be in a little bit of trouble. So after getting Proxy Marauder, I suggest doing it what Taeja does, get Factory into Starport, and of course then get your Command Center, because you're saving money by not really using the barracks to build units. And in this case, he's getting a few, but in most cases, use this barracks to fly around the base and scout, and not to go ahead and build those Marines. So going forward here, we can see the builds from the two different players. Heart is actually going for Cloak Banshees, right? And this is a pretty standard opening TvT. It's one of the more common ones anyway. And what Taeja does that's really cool is he's expanding, and he gets, of course, a Viking and Widow Mines. Widow Mines, of course, being in the medevac. And this is going to allow him to scout. And Widow Mines can be used defensively as well if you made a few extra. And then, of course, you always want to get that Viking defensively as well. Just playing a standard macro game. The drop's going to come in here. Ideally, you would put a Widow Mine to block your opponent's natural if they're already building it there, and you can't really do that. Not able to get quite that much damage in all this. Widow Mine is going to focus on this to be picked that off, so that's a nice win. But what's important to notice is the fact that what Taeja is going to do, he's going to go for delayed Cloak Banshee. So his opponent went Cloak Banshee, he was able to figure it out and get the appropriate defense. And there's a lot of people that say, okay, as my opponent builds up their economy, right? They're in a situation where he's going to have a second base, he's going to have a couple production structures, he's probably going to have an eBay anyway to get bio upgrades, right, at a certain point. So why should I invest in Cloak later on? But the one thing is that often, because of that reasoning, getting a delayed Cloak, like what Taeja's doing right now, starting Cloak at like the 9:30 mark, so it's going to come out very late, can often pay huge dividends. Just like at the 18-minute mark of a game, sometimes you can add a Dark Shrine as a Protoss and all of a sudden do massive damage with DTs, because people just don't think of the Cloak units. They're worried about them as an opener, because everyone who's played a couple ladder games has died to a DT rush before, Cloak Banshee rush before. But you think of it like that, like, okay, I might die to it early. the delayed factor can often do a lot of damage done. As you see here, Heart, because he's not anticipating cloak play, he doesn't have a lot of energy on either of these orbital commands. And so if we flip over to Taeja's viewpoint, we can see here his first Banshee's coming in. There's no missile turrets being started, right? Even though he does have an eBay, he doesn't have any missile turrets up, and he doesn't have much energy on these command centers. He doesn't have a Raven, so all of a sudden the Cloak Banshee can get a lot of damage done here because it's a little bit delayed. So he's going to come in here and just kill a whole bunch of these Marines. And of course, eventually missile turret gets up, but 12 kills already, and then even this Banshee here getting a few more kills before being taken out. So delayed cloak is actually a really, really nice thing to do. Just because your opponent won't anticipate it, and like you saw here, you can get 12 kills before those turrets can actually get up. So now we're in a situation where, especially on Daybreak, the threat of a Doom Drop is very important. What I mean by a Doom Drop is you basically you pick up your army and you put it all in their base, and then you put them in siege mode. Because everyone knows in TvT, it's almost never cost efficient to go straight up against siege tanks that are already sieged up. But if you put them in your opponent's base, any unit they build will instantly die, so they have to take up that position. They have to take a bad trade. And we're going to go for these Doom Drops on Daybreak. One of the reasons why they're often so good is, let me talk a little bit about the map of Daybreak in general, is as your opponent gets multiple expansions and really starts to set up, you can think of this fact. The third base in Daybreak is pretty far away from the main and natural. So let's say you're trying to attack the top right? And these are the bases they have here. We'll put a little money sign for each of them. And we'll use yellow. You as the yellow player, if you can ever take control of the area in front of their bases, if you can ever take control of this watchtower, right? Now all of a sudden you're in a great situation to basically use that map control tactically to always get a Doom Drop off somewhere. Because you can threaten a Doom Drop right in their main here, and if you get sieged up there, you pretty much win the game. You can also threaten just to walk up the ramp and attack here and siege up there, and if you get sieged up in this location, right, you can either deny the natural, or if you're not quite in range of natural, if you have a defender, you can just walk down and kill the third base. Of course, the other option, if they're defending this ramp in their main, you can just fly your units over here and Doom Drop in this location directly, or you can even walk this way. That takes a little bit longer because it's you don't really have a direct path there. But the idea is that from your spot, you can quickly jump to multiple locations, and your opponent's army, his movement path between these is not very easy, right? He has to go down, he has to go back and down the ramp to get in and out of the main, which means if his army's not in the main or close to this ramp, if his army is anywhere in this section, you can easily get into main. If his army is anywhere in the main, you can easily then just go this way and hit that third base. So lines got kind of jumbled there, but the idea is if you have central map control, you're in a great position, which is why on Daybreak and TvT, insanely important to have control of your watchtower. There's almost no spot on the map that's more important than your own watchtower. I mean, besides, of course, your actual bases themselves. But if you're going to control one part of the map, control your watchtower, because that's the area that if they take that, they can go to whichever your three bases very, very easily. So, of course, in this situation, we see Taeja having units at his watchtower very important. And if you have units at your watchtower, you know your opponent can't come up this way, right? And so you can afford to have your army up here. As long as you additionally have a unit like down here or something like that. But as long as you have a watchtower and you have a unit down here, you can keep most of your army in your main up until you get a nice missile turret wall up to stop the Doom Drops. So that's why we can see here Taeja with most of his army in the main. Unfortunately, what he does is, for some reason, he moves his army out of the main, right? And I don't know what he saw that prompted that, because like I said, he has a scout here, so he knows his opponent can't get there without him seeing. He has control of the middle watchtower. And maybe he's moving out to do an attack. That could be it. But one thing that's always a little bit risky is if you move out to do an attack blind, this can happen. Your opponent can get into position. Or really, if his army was right here already before this drop hit, he could be sieging up the same time as his opponent. With equal siege timings, of course he's going to win, because look at his army and it's so much bigger because it's right by his production. Of course, what he's able to do is use these double seeker missiles to take out one of the tanks along with the auto turret tank some damage. And that weakens his force enough that he's able to come in there and tear through it. Of course, it's still not particularly efficient. He's actually losing more than his opponent at cleaning this up. But making the best of a bad situation. And it would have been much, much worse if... actually, let's back this up a second. That would have been much, much, much worse if one of two things happened. One, if let's say he was on 3 bases and his army was down here, and he would lose all these reactors and SCVs before he could even get there. And then 2, if his opponent was a little bit better with the marine positioning and kept these these 4 or 5 Marines after they killed the Banshee, if they would have headed down here to help tank for the tanks instead of shooting the refinery, that would have been nice too. But small details. Bottom line is, if you have control of your watchtower, you can have the confidence to keep your army more in your main base to stop those doom drops. If you don't have the watchtower, you have to be very afraid of them attacking this way or them dropping straight to your third. And it's a little bit more difficult to tactically put your army in your main base. So we can see there, because he was able to be close to his main, he could defend that drop. But now he's going to kind of do the same thing to his opponent. And this is the exact same idea about map control. The most important thing is your watchtower. Second most important thing, of course, is the vision of your main. And also, remember, like I said before, we saw Taeja had the Marine here. You got to have a Marine in this location. Or an SCV or something. And the reason why is because if you don't, your opponent can do this. And all of a sudden, they're dropping right into your natural. And this is another key spot. This is a spot that he can't give up. Just like he can't give up his main. Right? If there's siege tanks in his main, he has to go and fight him. This is the exact same position because even if he can make a defensive tank line and protect the command center, the third base is going to be forfeit. There's no way to hold that if Taeja sets up here. So he has to pull with SCVs, try to fight this position, and of course, it's not going to be cost efficient. He's fighting up against siege tanks in siege mode, and in fact, he's not even going to be able to quite finish it off. Although he's able to kill enough. He's able to kill enough of the Marines that he can hang in there. And actually, army sizes are fairly close now. But that's because he buffered with SCVs, and now he only has 25 SCVs. So he's pretty much lost. And it's really cool how Taeja backs out of here because he realizes, he has his tanks left. His opponent would just drop Marines on top of them. So very, very smart to back away there. Got a very cost-efficient trade. Now he's up 30 food. He just goes on to win the game another couple minutes from now. But it's pretty much over at this point. So a couple of things I want to basically remind you guys watching this game in TvT is 2 things. One, Banshees are pretty awesome. So even if you're not Banshee rushing, always consider going to a Cloak Banshee. If you know your opponent doesn't have a Raven, so basically if they're not going hardcore mech and getting that early Raven, then getting a delayed Cloak Banshee is worth it, I would say, more often than not. I've very rarely seen a delayed Cloak Banshee not do enough damage to pay itself off. It almost always gets something done. Now, of course, it's only worth it if you don't really need to starport for anything else. So if you're doing something like you get a command center early and also you have a lot of Marine production because you have a lot of money, then you might really want those medevacs because you can have stim fast. But if you're in a build situation where you have to factor in your starport before your command center, then even after you get the command center, it's like, I don't need a whole lot of medevacs right now because I don't even have many Marines. Go ahead and get the delayed Cloak Banshee. It'll really help you out a lot. Then, of course, also map control. Very, very important. Always control your watchtower. Most important thing. This skin did a great job of that, but a couple things they forgot is you also got to control the area heading towards your third base and also the area by your main. Have a little Viking patrolling out there, a floating barrack, something to keep eyes on it because in TvT, if your opponent gets a doom drop set up, if they can land their units, get their tanks sieged up before you're there, it's almost always going to be cost efficient for them. So really keep an eye on those doom drops, and if you notice your opponent doesn't have scouting, go ahead, scan to see where their army is, and then go for that good doom drop on wherever the army isn't. So wraps up our first segment. We'll take a short break and be right on to our second segment just after a short break.